Welcome back, you silent assassins, you masters of emotional warfare, you beautiful, terrifying ghosts who learn to weaponize stillness. Yeah, I see you there, sitting in that chair with that half smile, that calm that makes people nervous, that energy that doesn't scream but somehow deafens entire rooms. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? That moment when they betrayed you, that moment when the knife went in, when the lies surfaced, when the masks dropped, and you... No tears, no rage, no public meltdown, no begging for answers, no desperate phone calls. At 3 a.m., asking, why, nothing, just silence, just that cold, calculated, bone-chilling silence that made them check their phones, wondering if you even cared, if you even noticed, if you were even human anymore. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. Here's the secret they don't want you to know. Your non-reaction wasn't weakness. It wasn't shock. It wasn't you being in denial, or trying to be mature, or taking the high road. No. Your non-reaction was the most sophisticated psychological weapon ever deployed in interpersonal warfare, and you didn't even realize you were holding a loaded gun. You see, while they were expecting tears, you gave them nothing. While they were waiting for anger, you gave them silence. While they anticipated drama, chaos, broken glass, and social media posts dripping with pain, you gave them absolutely zero ammunition, zero supply, zero emotional feedback to feed on. And that right there broke their entire playbook. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where it gets beautiful. This is where your accidental genius turned into legendary status. They started panicking, not immediately. No. At first, they felt relief. They felt like they got away with it. Like you were too weak to fight back, too broken to respond. But then hours turned into days. Days turned into weeks. And your silence didn't break, didn't crack, didn't even whisper. And that's when the fear set in. That's when they started obsessively checking your stories, your posts, your activity status, desperately searching for signs of collapse, for evidence of suffering, for proof that they still had power over your emotional state. But you gave them nothing. Absolutely nothing. And in that void, in that absence of reaction, their minds started filling in the blanks with their worst nightmares. Because here's what you need to understand about people who betray. They need your reaction more than they need air. They need to know they still matter, that they still have influence, that they can still make you feel something. Your pain is their validation. Your tears are their proof of significance. Your anger is their entertainment. But when you give them nothing, when you respond to their nuclear bomb with complete and total indifference, you rewrite the entire war. You become the anomaly in their equation, the variable that doesn't compute, the human being who somehow transcended the basic emotional responses they've spent their entire lives learning to manipulate. And now they're the ones losing sleep. Now they're the ones obsessing. Now they're the ones trapped in a psychological prison of their own making. You want to know why military intelligence agencies and corporate espionage divisions are now studying your exact response pattern? Yeah, you heard that right. There are actual professionals, trained operatives with degrees in psychology and decades of field experience, sitting in rooms analyzing the precise mechanics of your non-reaction, trying to reverse engineer it into a teachable methodology. They call it the Zero Echo Protocol. They've given it a name. They've created PowerPoint presentations. They've written case studies, all because you, in your moment of deepest betrayal, accidentally discovered what professional manipulators spend careers trying to perfect: complete emotional opacity, total psychological invisibility, the ability to absorb an attack and reflect absolutely nothing back. 20 years. Let that sink in for a second. 20 years of training, of simulations, of practice scenarios, of controlled environments where they teach operatives how to maintain composure under interrogation, how to withstand psychological torture, how to keep their faces blank when their loved ones are threatened in hypothetical scenarios. 20 years of that, and they still can't replicate what you did naturally in 20 seconds. You know why? Because their training is artificial. It's learned behavior layered over natural human responses. But you weren't performing. You weren't acting. You weren't trying to appear strong or unbothered or mature. You genuinely, authentically, on a cellular level, stopped giving them access to your emotional interior. You didn't fake indifference, you achieved it. And that's the difference between performance and transformation. Here's what really happened in that moment. The moment they were expecting you to shatter. Something inside you died. Yes, but not in the way they imagined. It wasn't your spirit that died. It wasn't your hope. It wasn't your capacity for love. What died was your need for their understanding. What died was your attachment to their version of reality. What died was the part of you that still believed people like them deserved explanations, closure, or the privilege of witnessing your pain. You underwent an instant evolution, a psychological mutation that typically takes people decades of therapy to achieve. You learned in one moment what most people never learn in a lifetime: that some people aren't owed your energy, your time, your tears, or your truth. They studied your face in that moment, did you know that? They were watching for the micro-expressions, the tiny muscle movements that betray internal emotional states. They were trained to read you, to catch the flicker of pain in your eyes, the tension in your jaw, the slight tremor in your hands. But you gave them nothing. Your face remained a perfect mask of neutrality, not because you were trying, but because somewhere deep in your neural pathways, a switch flipped. Your brain, in its infinite wisdom, recognized a threat and deployed the ultimate defense mechanism. You didn't just close the door. You removed the entire wall. You deleted the architecture of connection itself. And now they're teaching this in classrooms. I'm not joking. There are university psychology programs using your response pattern as a case study in advanced emotional regulation. There are therapy groups discussing the spontaneous detachment phenomenon, where individuals under extreme stress achieve instant Buddhist monk-level non-attachment without any formal training. There are neuroscience papers being written about the specific brain state you entered, that rare configuration of neural activity where the amygdala shuts down threat response because it's calculated that engagement itself is the greater danger. You became a scientific mystery by accident, just by refusing to play their game. Let's talk about what happened to them after your silence took hold, because this is the part they don't want anyone to know. In the days following their betrayal, when you maintained radio silence, when you didn't reach out, didn't confront, didn't demand explanations, didn't post cryptic quotes or sad songs, something started happening to their psychology. At first, they felt powerful. They felt like they'd won, like they'd gotten away with it clean. But humans are wired for closure, for completion, for responses that match actions. When you betray someone, your brain actually expects backlash. It prepares for consequences. It braces for impact. And when that impact never comes, when the expected response is replaced with eerie, unnatural silence, the brain doesn't interpret that as victory. It interprets it as existential threat. They started second-guessing everything. Were you okay? Were you too okay? Did you even care? Did they ever matter to you at all? Were you playing a longer game they couldn't see? The questions multiplied, spiraling into obsession. They found themselves checking your social media more than you ever checked theirs. They found themselves asking mutual friends about you with carefully casual questions that fooled no one. They found themselves lying awake at night, replaying the moment they betrayed you, analyzing your face, your words, your energy, searching desperately for clues they missed, for signs of weakness they could cling to. You had given them nothing to work with, nothing to decode, nothing to comfort themselves with. Your silence became their torture. And here's the beautiful irony. They did this to themselves. You weren't trying to punish them. You weren't playing mind games. You weren't strategically withholding reaction to make them suffer. You genuinely, authentically moved on so completely and thoroughly that they ceased to exist as a significant factor in your emotional landscape. You didn't need closure because you gave it to yourself. You didn't need answers because you already knew everything that mattered. They were capable of betrayal, and you were capable of surviving it. End of story. System reboot complete. Now here's where it gets really interesting, where your accidental genius becomes legendary. In the weeks and months following your non-reaction, they started noticing something disturbing about themselves. They couldn't move on. While you were out there, living your life, evolving, growing, becoming stronger versions of yourself, they were stuck, frozen in the moment of betrayal, trapped in an infinite loop of wondering why you didn't react. Their new relationships felt hollow because their new partners didn't have your energy. Their achievements felt empty because you weren't there to witness them. Their lives became haunted by your absence, not because you were gone, but because you left so completely, so thoroughly, with such absolute finality that there was no hope of return. And this is what breaks people like them. The realization that they lost someone who couldn't be replaced, someone who gave them something they didn't know was valuable until it was gone, someone whose presence in their life was so unique, so specific, so irreplaceable that every person who came after felt like a cheap imitation. They destroyed something precious, thinking they could find it again somewhere else, thinking the grass would be greener, thinking you were just another person in an infinite sea of options. But you weren't. And now they know it. And that knowledge is a prison sentence with no parole, no appeal, no possibility of early release. The intelligence agencies studying your response pattern identified 3 key elements that made it so devastatingly effective. First, the speed of deployment. You didn't take days or weeks to calm down and then choose silence. You went silent immediately, cutting off their supply of emotional feedback before they could even finish their betrayal. This instantaneous withdrawal created a psychological whiplash effect, where they went from expecting maximum drama to receiving absolute zero in less than 60 seconds. Second, the completeness of the cutoff. You didn't give them breadcrumbs, didn't leave doors slightly open, didn't maintain just enough contact to keep hope alive. You went full scorched earth, total communication blackout, complete psychological separation. Third, the authenticity of indifference. They could tell you weren't performing, weren't faking, weren't pretending. Your energy genuinely shifted from invested to void, and that authenticity made it impossible for them to rationalize or cope. They tried to replicate this in training scenarios and failed every single time. You know why? Because you can't teach genuine emotional detachment to people who are only performing it. You can teach someone to keep a straight face, sure. You can teach someone to control their words, their body language, their visible reactions. But you can't teach someone to genuinely stop caring on command. You can't manufacture authentic indifference. You can't fake the specific energy signature of someone who has truly, completely, irreversibly moved on from caring about your opinion, your presence, or your existence. That's not a skill. That's a state of being. And you achieved it naturally because your survival instinct was stronger than your need for closure. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of what you did, because this is where it becomes a masterclass in psychological warfare without even trying. When they betrayed you, they were expecting a predictable sequence of events: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. The classic grief cycle. They had scripts prepared for each stage, responses ready, manipulations planned. But you skipped the entire cycle. You went from discovery straight to complete detachment, bypassing all the stages they were prepared to exploit. This created a system error in their manipulation matrix. They couldn't proceed to step 2 because you never gave them step 1. Their entire playbook became useless. Their years of practice manipulating human emotion suddenly irrelevant because you weren't following human emotional patterns. Your brain did something extraordinary in that moment. It recognized the betrayal not as a personal attack requiring emotional processing, but as information requiring strategic response. And the optimal strategic response to a hostile actor is complete disengagement, no energy expenditure, no resource allocation, no attention given. You treated them like a computer treats a deleted file, not with hatred, not with anger, just with absolute indifference, as if they never existed in the first place. And this is what professional interrogators and intelligence operatives train decades to achieve. The ability to receive devastating information and process it as pure data rather than emotional stimulus. They're writing textbooks about you now. Actual textbooks. Chapter titles include The Spontaneous Achievement of Operational Detachment, Zero Feedback Loops, and Psychological Dominance. And my personal favorite, When the Target Becomes the Operator, Accidental Mastery of Emotional Warfare Protocols. These aren't metaphors. These are real academic and military publications, analyzing the specific psychological mechanisms you deployed without formal training. You're being studied in the same way they study natural savants, people who can perform complex mathematical calculations instantly without knowing how, people who can play music perfectly without lessons. You're an emotional warfare savant. Here's what's happening right now in their mind, years later. Because yes, this is still affecting them. They're sitting somewhere, maybe in a relationship, maybe alone, and suddenly a song plays that reminds them of you, or they see someone who walks like you, or they catch a scent that triggers a memory, and in that moment, the wound reopens. Not because they miss you, but because they're reminded of the one person who ever looked at them and decided they weren't worth a reaction. The one person who saw their betrayal and responded with such complete indifference that it called into question everything they believed about their own significance. You didn't just reject them, you didn't just leave them. You erased them from your book of people who matter. And that erasure is permanent. The psychological impact of your non-reaction created what researchers now call inverse narcissistic injury. Normally, when you hurt someone and they react with pain, anger, or pleading, it confirms your power over them, your significance in their life. But when you hurt someone and they respond with nothing, with genuine void-level indifference, it creates a devastating realization. I wasn't important enough to hurt. I wasn't significant enough to warrant a reaction. My betrayal wasn't even worth acknowledging. This destroys the ego at a fundamental level because it strips away the illusion of importance that most people desperately cling to. And here's the ultimate irony. They'll never be able to use what you did against someone else. Even now, knowing what you did, understanding the mechanics, seeing the effectiveness, they can't replicate it because your power came from authenticity, from genuine transformation, from real evolution. They're still operating from ego, from performance, from manipulation. They can practice the silence, they can withhold reactions, they can play the game, but it will always be just that. A game, a performance, a fake. And people can smell fake from miles away. Your power was in the truth of your indifference. Their attempts will always be transparent lies. 20 years of training versus 20 seconds of transformation. Professional operatives with unlimited resources versus one person who just got tired of caring. Sophisticated psychological warfare techniques developed over decades versus accidental genius born from survival instinct. And you won. You didn't just win. You redefined the playing field. You didn't just survive. You evolved. You didn't just move on. You transcended, and now they're studying you, teaching you, trying desperately to understand how someone with no training, no preparation, no formal education in psychological warfare could deploy the most effective emotional defense mechanism ever documented. You want to know the real reason they're so obsessed with understanding your response? It's not academic curiosity. It's not professional interest. It's fear. Because if one person can naturally achieve what takes them decades to learn, if one person can accidentally stumble into mastery-level emotional warfare capabilities, then everything they've built their careers on, everything they've spent years learning, every technique they've perfected, you represent the natural evolution of human psychology beyond their control systems. You're proof that authentic transformation beats manufactured composure every single time. So here you are, living your life, probably not even thinking about them anymore. Definitely not dwelling on the betrayal. Almost certainly not aware that you've become a case study in multiple academic and professional fields. You're just existing, breathing, moving forward with your life, and somewhere in a classroom, in a training facility, in a psychology lab, someone is showing your response pattern to a room full of people and saying this is the goal. This is what we're trying to achieve. And those people are taking notes, asking questions, running simulations, trying desperately to replicate what you did without thinking. Ah, look who's still standing. Hello to the one they tried to erase with numbers, with noise, with an entire army of cowards hiding behind each other's backs. Hello to you, the soul who faced a mob and didn't blink, didn't fold, didn't beg for mercy you never needed. Hello to the nightmare they assembled a task force to fight and lost to anyway. Because something happened, didn't it? An illusion of power. They gathered reinforcements like you were some existential threat, called in backup like they were preparing for war, formed prayer circles like they needed spiritual intervention, and still, you dominated every single one of them without even raising your voice. They came in numbers because individually they knew they couldn't touch you. They needed strength in quantity because they lacked it in quality. And now they're scattered, whispering in dark corners about the day they tried to take you down and failed so spectacularly that it became legend. Let me paint you a picture of what really went down. They sat in their little meetings, their group chats lighting up like emergency signals, their phones buzzing with coordinated panic. We need everyone, they said. This one's different. This one won't go quietly. They strategized, they plotted, they rehearsed their attacks like a military operation. They brought the gossips, the manipulators, the fake friends, the jealous exes, the insecure authorities, the threatened competitors, every single person who ever felt small in your presence. They lined up like an army of broken mirrors, each one reflecting their own inadequacy, but pointing it at you like a weapon. And you know what's beautiful? You know what's absolutely poetic about this entire circus? You weren't even trying to fight them. You were just existing, just breathing, just being yourself with such unapologetic intensity that it made them collectively lose their minds. They called backup because one-on-one, they knew the truth. Face to face with you, they'd crumble. Eye to eye, they'd see themselves for what they really are. Scared little souls who built their confidence on tearing others down. So they needed numbers, needed the illusion of unity, needed to feel like they were part of something bigger than their own cowardice. If we all attack together, we can break them, they whispered to each other in the dark, convincing themselves that collective hatred somehow made them right, somehow made them strong. But here's what they forgot, here's what they never understood. You don't break when outnumbered. You multiply. Every person they sent at you became another layer of armor, another reason to rise, another testament to your unbreakable core. They thought they were building an army against you, but they were actually building your mythology. Brick by brick, attack by attack, failure by failure. Oh, and the prayer circles? Let's talk about those for a second. They literally gathered in spiritual formations, begging for intervention because their earthly tactics weren't working. Think about that. They prayed for your downfall like you were some kind of supernatural force that needed heavenly interference to stop. They invoked powers beyond themselves because they recognized, even if they'd never admitted, that you operate on a frequency they can't comprehend. Their prayers bounced off you like rain off stone, because you weren't the villain in their story, you were the consequence of their actions. The mirror they couldn't shatter, the truth they couldn't silence. And when those prayers went unanswered, when you kept rising despite their spiritual warfare, that's when the real fear set in. That's when they realized they weren't fighting a person anymore. They were fighting a force, a movement, an inevitability. Now, here's where it gets delicious, where the story shifts from their perspective to yours. While they were busy assembling their coalition of cowards, you were doing something they couldn't fathom. You were healing in silence, building in shadows, transforming your pain into precision. They were so focused on destroying you that they didn't notice you were already 10 steps ahead, already evolved past their comprehension. Every meeting they held, you were getting stronger. Every prayer circle they formed, you were getting clearer. Every reinforcement they called, you were getting sharper, because you understood something fundamental that they never would. Real power doesn't need an audience, doesn't need validation, doesn't need backup. Real power is so complete, so self-contained, so absolute that it exists independent of opposition. You didn't need to fight their army, because you were never at war with them. You were at war with your old self, and you won that battle while they were still picking team. They brought everyone. The people who smiled at your birthday parties while plotting your destruction. The ones who called you friend while preparing your funeral behind closed doors. The family members who used blood as an excuse for betrayal. The colleagues who needed you small to feel big. The romantic interests who couldn't handle your evolution. The competitors who mistook your kindness for weakness. They assembled the entire town, every person who ever felt threatened by your light, every soul who saw your potential and panicked. And you know what happened? You looked at their army, their reinforcements, their backup, their prayer circles, their coordinated assault, and you smiled. Not because you were arrogant, but because you finally saw clearly. You finally understood that their united front wasn't strength. It was terror. They needed everyone because alone each of them knew you could outthink, outlast, and outshine them without effort. Here's what they didn't calculate in their master plan. They assumed you'd fight their way, on their terms, in their arena. They expected screaming matches, public defenses, emotional breakdowns. They wanted you to scramble, to panic, to show weakness they could exploit. But you did something they couldn't predict, something that shattered their entire strategy. You went silent. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of someone who's ascended past the need to explain themselves to people operating at lower frequencies. Your silence was deafening, more powerful than any rebuttal could ever be. While they screamed into the void, you built an empire in quiet corners. While they gossiped, you grew. While they plotted, you transformed. Your silence became the loudest statement, the most devastating response, because it communicated one undeniable truth. You don't owe explanations to armies that wouldn't understand enlightenment if it slapped them in the face. Let me tell you what happened after their initial assault failed. Confusion. Absolute, bewildering, identity-shaking confusion. They couldn't understand why you weren't broken, why you weren't begging, why you weren't giving them the satisfaction of your pain. So they doubled down, called more backup, intensified their prayers, spread more rumors, applied more pressure, and with each escalation something beautiful happened. You became more untouchable. Each attack made you more unreachable, not because you were hiding, but because you were elevating. They were still fighting on ground level while you were building towers in dimensions they couldn't perceive. Their weapons, their words, their carefully coordinated strikes, all of it passed through you like you were made of something they couldn't touch, couldn't damage, couldn't even properly define. You became the ghost in their machine, the error in their code, the anomaly that broke their understanding of how power works. Now, we need to talk about what dominating actually means in this context, because you didn't dominate in the way they expected. You didn't crush them publicly, didn't destroy their reputations, didn't seek revenge in obvious ways. Your domination was far more profound, far more complete. You dominated by simply existing at a level they couldn't reach. You dominated by healing when they expected you to break. You dominated by growing when they expected you to shrink. You dominated by thriving when they expected you to disappear. Every day you woke up stronger was a victory they couldn't explain. Every moment you chose peace over their chaos was a battle won. Every breath you took without needing their approval was another brick in the empire they could never enter. Your domination wasn't loud, but it was absolute. It was the quiet, devastating domination of someone who realized the entire game was rigged and decided to build their own board, their own rules, their own definition of winning. They thought numbers would overwhelm you. They believed that if enough people said you were wrong, you'd start to believe it too. They assumed that collective rejection would make you question your worth. But here's what they miscalculated so catastrophically. Your worth was never determined by their consensus. Your value was never up for vote. Your power was never dependent on their recognition. You stopped asking for seats at tables that were beneath you. You stopped seeking approval from people whose opinion held no weight in the reality you were building. You stopped participating in their theater of judgment because you realized you were never an actor in their play. You were the director of your own story, and they didn't even have speaking roles anymore. So, when they brought the whole town, you simply left the town. Not physically, but energetically. You removed yourself from their frequency, their wavelength, their entire dimension of small thinking and petty warfare. Let's dig deeper into their psychology, because this is where it gets fascinating. Why did they need so many people to fight one person? Fear. Pure, undiluted, existential fear. They saw something in you that terrified them, not because you were threatening, but because you were free. You represented everything they were too cowardly to become, every dream they abandoned, every truth they suppressed, every authentic self they murdered for acceptance. All of it was reflected in your eyes, and they couldn't stand it. So they needed reinforcements to validate their fear, to make it seem reasonable. See, everyone agrees this person is dangerous. We're not wrong for attacking them. They needed backup to distribute the guilt, to dilute the responsibility. If everyone's throwing stones, no single person has to face the weight of what they're doing. They needed prayer circles, because deep down, somewhere beneath all the justifications, they knew they were fighting something pure, and they needed forgiveness in advance for the sin they were committing. Here's the part that probably kept you awake some nights, the part that tested your resolve more than any attack, watching them unite. Seeing people you thought were neutral pick sides against you. Witnessing the town you once considered home transform into hostile territory. Feeling the isolation of being the target that finally got all these different factions to agree on something. Your destruction. Those moments were designed to break you, and for a while, maybe they cracked you. Maybe you questioned everything. Maybe you wondered if you were the problem. Maybe you stood in front of mirrors asking yourself what made you so easy to hate collectively. But then you remembered something crucial. The greatest souls in history were also the most opposed. The brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. The most transformative forces faced the most resistance. You weren't hated because you were wrong, you were targeted because you were right. And your rightness made their wrongness unbearable to ignore. Now, let's talk about the prayer circles specifically, because there's something darkly poetic about this. They gathered in circles, held hands, closed their eyes, and begged for your downfall like it was a righteous cause. They convinced themselves that their attack was sanctified, that their cruelty had spiritual backing. They dressed up their jealousy as justice, their fear as faith, their mob mentality as moral authority, and then they opened their eyes expecting you to be humbled, defeated, broken by their collective spiritual weight. Instead, you were still standing, still growing, still glowing with a light that no amount of shadow could diminish. Their prayers didn't work, because the universe doesn't answer requests rooted in hatred. Their rituals failed because true power doesn't bow to ceremonies born from insecurity. They called on forces they didn't understand to fight a battle they'd already lost the moment they chose numbers over truth. Here's what your victory looks like. It's not loud, not flashy, not the kind of thing that makes headlines. Your victory is walking through life unbothered while they're still obsessing over you. Your victory is building something beautiful while they're still trying to explain your existence to each other. Your victory is finding peace while they're still searching for validation through your destruction. You don't need to announce your win because everyone can see it. They see it in how you carry yourself now. With the weight of someone who survived an attempted assassination by an entire community and came out more alive than ever. They see it in your eyes, which no longer seek approval or fear judgment. They see it in your silence, which speaks louder than all their coordinated noise ever could. Your victory is existential, unshakable, permanent. Let me tell you what they're doing now. In the aftermath of their failed campaign, they're scattered, confused, quietly dealing with the cognitive dissonance of watching someone they attacked with everything still thriving. Some are in denial, convincing themselves you're just good at hiding your pain. Others are in anger, frustrated that their prayers and plots didn't work. A few have reached bargaining, trying to subtly reconnect as if their betrayal never happened. Some have fallen into depression, realizing they wasted so much energy on trying to dim a light they could have learned from. And the rare ones have reached acceptance, quietly acknowledging that they were wrong, though they'll never say it out loud. Meanwhile, you've moved beyond all 5 stages of grief because you never mourned their loss. You celebrated their absence. Every person who left made room for something better. Every attack cleared space for new growth. Every prayer circle pushed you further into your destiny. What they don't understand, what they'll never grasp, is that you weren't fighting to win their approval. You were fighting to free yourself from needing it. They thought the battle was about reputation, about who could gather more supporters, about public opinion. But you were fighting a completely different war, one they couldn't even see. You were battling your own limitations, your own doubts, your own tendency to shrink for others' comfort. And while they were busy trying to tear you down externally, you were busy building yourself up internally. So when their attacks finally stopped, when they ran out of ammunition and energy, they expected to find ruins. Instead, they found a fortress. They expected a broken person, begging for re-entry into their society. Instead, they found someone who'd built an entire civilization they weren't invited to. Your victory wasn't over them. It was over the version of yourself that once cared about their judgment. Here's the uncomfortable truth they're living with now. Every time they see you succeeding, every time your name comes up in conversation, every time someone mentions your growth, they're reminded of their failure. They're forced to confront the fact that they assembled an army and still couldn't stop one person from becoming everything they feared. They have to live with the knowledge that their collective power was no match for your individual truth, and that eats at them in ways no revenge ever could. They found you don't need to do anything to them because their own guilt, their own shame, their own awareness of what they attempted and failed to do, That's punishment enough. They tried to write you out of the story, but you became the author. They tried to dim your light, but you became the sun. They tried to silence your voice, but you became the echo that won't fade. Let's address something important here. You're not perfect, and this isn't about pretending you are. This isn't about claiming you never made mistakes or never had flaws. This is about recognizing that your imperfections never justified their organized cruelty. This is about understanding that even if you weren't perfect, you didn't deserve an army of people coordinating your destruction. This is about knowing that growth happens through challenge, not through collective punishment disguised as accountability. They didn't come together to help you grow. They came together to watch you fall. And the fact that you didn't, the fact that you turned their coordinated attack into fuel for your transformation, that's what makes this whole thing so powerful. You didn't need to be perfect to deserve better. You just needed to be yourself, and yourself was enough to survive everything they threw at you. Now, we enter the part they really don't want acknowledged. Somewhere in their private moments, in the quiet hours when they're alone with their thoughts, they think about you. They wonder how you did it, how you survived what was designed to destroy you. They scroll through your life from a distance, checking to see if you're really okay or just pretending. And when they see evidence of your genuine happiness, your real growth, your authentic peace, something inside them breaks a little more, because it confirms what they couldn't accept, that you were never the problem. Their need to gang up on one person, their requirement for backup and reinforcements and prayer circles to face someone who was just being themselves, that revealed everything about them and nothing about you. You were the scapegoat for their collective insecurities, the target for frustrations that had nothing to do with you. And now that you've removed yourself from that role, they're forced to look at each other and finally see what was really broken all along. Here's your power now, post-battle, post-victory. You move through the world with the confidence of someone who faced a mob and didn't flinch.